it feels like fire and brimstone is like a sort of cult tactic.
I guess it would be a cult like if they were saying you have to be saved in their church or you have to be baptized in their church, like their particular church or their particular denomination.
Mm-hmm.
That would be cult like to me. I don't know if it's cult like in the way that it's presented. I think it's erroneous. I don't think it's correct. I don't know if it's cult like.
Because it feels like you're saying, hey, because if this was like wrapped up in, all they'd have to do is say, like, follow me, I'll show you how to not end up there.
Right.
Like, that feels like the logical next line to, hey, if you don't, you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
If you don't do this, you're burning in hell forever.
Right.
And I'm the only one that could save you.
Right.
With my magical book of of Jesus.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so it just feels very culty.
Okay.
To go this direction.
Yeah. And I think it depends probably on the church.
Okay.
Like, so like if you're in a church, like that's all that's preached, like that's all that's talked about is fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
You know, and like, I think it'd be cult like or manipulative like if that wasn't just how you got saved, but that's how you stay saved. Right. Like, in other words, like every Sunday it's about, oh, you sinned this week.
Right.
You need to repent, get to the altar, get right with God.
Okay.
You know, like you've heard maybe some people talk about, you know, I rededicated my life to Christ, you know, 100 times between the ages of 13 and 15,
right.
You know, kind of thing. And because every week was a sermon that was telling them to do that. I think that kind of becomes more cult-like to me. Because you're really kind of keeping them there based on fear.
Right. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're almost like trapping them there
mm-hmm.
based on like, so the whole message becomes about fear as opposed to everything else that's in the gospel and in the word. And so yeah, I could see where that feels cult like.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know,
so should I, how would I know if the person doing the fire and brimstone speech to me,
mm-hmm.
I'm not going to end up in a church full of only fire and brimstone stuff for the rest of my life and get trapped in this?
Right. I mean, I think
that feels like the problem for me.
Sure. I think that, I don't know if there's a way to know initially. Like if you're just talking to some guy on the side of the road, right? Or having a conversation with them at your job or whatever it may be. I don't know if there's a way to know that.
Okay.
Completely. I had someone reach out to me one time and they said, so I've been going to this church and every Sunday for the last, ever months, I've rededicated my life to Christ because that's all the preacher preaches on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, you need to find our church. Like, but they didn't know that going in.
Mm.
But I was like, yeah, you need to find our church. Like you are never going to grow in Jesus if that's all you're like, if all I'm ever hearing is repent, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to hell. Repent. God hates you, whatever it may be. You horrible sinner, you should feel horrible about yourself. You know, there's shame and guilt attached to all of it. Like, no, that is not where you want to be. You know, and some churches maybe are more bent toward that.
Mm.
Especially more like, and again, this is way stereotypical, but you know, if you were talking about like your more rural, like independent or fundamentalist Baptist churches or rural like Pentecostal churches or Pentecostal holiness churches, that element can be in those. It doesn't mean they are.
Okay.
It just means that it can be in those. You don't really see that as much in like a mainline denominational church. Like your Methodist, your Lutheran, your Presbyterian, your Anglican, Episcopalian. Yeah. But I think that's because on some of those, not like the Anglicans, but like, the United Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Lutherans, they've all kind of gone to more like the progressive liberal side. So you're not going to hear anything about fire and brimstone. You're going to hear about, I don't even know, like more like a social gospel.
Well, also like, 90% of the service is the same.
Yeah.
Every week.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Repeat the same things, get up, sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't get.
Well, but I think it's also just the theology behind some of that, right? Like,
right.
The reality is like you're going to hear more like the social things. Like, here's the things you can do to be a good person or to be a good contributor to society or in your community
or to the church.
Yeah. And so, as opposed to being intentional about one's own spiritual growth.
Right.
And so, but then like in other churches, again, like the mainline denominations, you're not going to hear that fire and brimstone stuff usually speaking, not always, but usually speaking, that's the case. Your more charismatic churches, you're probably not going to hear quite as much. Now, like old school Pentecostal, you definitely might hear it more there, but not like kind of like your non-denominational church, your non-denominational charismatic church. You're typically not going to hear that as much there. And again, like you said, and not as much as like in the high church. So, of like Anglican churches, which are really conservative, but that have high church. So they're going to go through all the liturgy and that kind of thing.